I needed a bigger boat. Professor Mark's weekly stock market Java report. Enjoy it, live it, read it. You only need this to navigate the markets. Enjoy.
Hello, Quint. Thank you for being here tonight. I have to say, for the last 45 years, I thought your name was Quinn, but I guess it doesn't make a difference. Anyway, Jaws is one of the greatest movies ever, and I'm got a kind of a somber attitude making this one because when I first thought like, oh, I'm going to do Jaws, oh, this is going to be so much fun, but then when you do a deeper dive and you realize that the story is based on tragedy, it's not as easy to be happy. Quinn was insane because of what happened in the World War to him. And I think it's just important to remember the people that were on the USS Indianapolis. So, that being said, let me kind of get into this. So, let's talk about our market principles, right? And we know, well, I mean, you might not know, but I know, and that's what I'm trying to teach you, that some price levels are more important than others. That's just the way it is. These are called support and resistance levels. So if a market is going lower, there's not enough demand or buy orders to absorb all of the supply or sell orders. So the sellers are forced to offer their shares out at a discount, and this creates a downtrend. When we get to a support level, this changes. There's more demand than supply. The market will stop going down. It might continue to go down after a pause or it might reverse. But when markets are going lower and they get to a support level, they tend to pause or reverse. Now, resistance level is the opposite. If a market is moving higher, it's because there's not enough supply or sell orders to fill all of the demand or buy orders. So buyers are forced to pay a premium, and this creates an uptrend. Now, a level that was support can convert into resistance because of buyer's remorse. Investors buy at support, the market maybe goes a little higher, then it goes lower and it gets below their price level that they bought out. And a lot of these investors say, I made a mistake. I'm experiencing buyer's remorse. I shouldn't have bought. I want to get out, but I'm only going to get out if I could sell it for break even. So they place their sell orders at the same level they had their buy orders at. So if you have enough remorseful buyers placing sell orders at the level that was support, the support can turn into resistance. Levels that were resistance can become support for the opposite reason, seller's remorse. Investors who sold at the level regret doing so when the price moves higher, and many of them decide to buy their shares back, but they're only going to do so if they can get them for the same price they were sold at. So if you have enough of these remorseful sellers placing buy orders at the level that was resistance, the resistance can convert into support. And we'll see some examples of that. All right, so let's go in here to our weekly newsletter where we overview the S&P 500 and the 12 sector or the 11 sectors that make it up. So once again, SPY is back around this important 390 level. This level was support here, right? Notice how support can become resistance. That's what I was just talking about, buyer's remorse. Investors bought here, the market goes lower. A lot of the investors who, assuming they still hold their shares, experience buyer's remorse. They want to sell, but they don't want to lose money, so they try to get out of break even. If there's enough of these sell orders placed by remorseful buyers at a level that was support, it turns into resistance. Here we have resistance turning into support. And you can see this on pretty much just about any chart there is. But investors sold, the market moves higher. A lot of the investors who sold regret doing so, and they tell themselves, I'm going to buy my shares back if I can get them at the same price I sold them at. So we have remorseful sellers placing buy orders at the level that was resistance. The level that was support, I'm sorry, the level that was resistance can convert into support. So much of trading is just understanding where these important levels are. It's like your roadmap to success in a lot of ways. And I don't want to sound silly or anything like that, but if you don't know where these important levels are, you're going to have a hard time trading. Like, why is the level 390 important? Why is it not 393, 387? I mean, I don't know. But anyway, resistance became support, support became resistance. Once again, we're right back to it here. Now, this is going to be an interesting week coming up here because we got the Fed testimony on Tuesday and Tuesday and Wednesday. Most people think they're going to raise rates by 25 basis points. The whole market is focused on inflation, and that makes sense. 98% of the time, the news that the media is telling you, like on Fox Business or on CNBC or whatever chat room you're in, is wrong. These people are journalists. They don't understand how the market works. But because they try, one of the things that really aggravates me is they try to tie every little move in the market into some kind of fundamental reason. 98% of the time it's not. When they're like, oh, market's up on COVID or market's down on this, they just want to attach a story to it. But, in the institutional trading world, no one sits around and trades off the headlines. But anyway, regardless of all that, what happens this week could give us the clue of the next move. I think we're going lower. The Fed has just raised rates too many times. There's an old saying on Wall Street, don't fight the Fed. And if you try to buy as they're raising rates, well, you're fighting the Fed. And the saying says, don't fight the Fed. So anyway, we're back to this 390 level. Now this level could be kind of negated because we traded through it, but we're still going to have to watch it. I mean, look at that. 390, 390, 390. Where do we close? 389.99. All right, let's go look at our tech sector, which is the biggest sector of the market. We might get a clue here, okay, as to which way the market's going to go. As a matter of fact, I'm very confident we're going to get a clue here. Notice how we hit resistance, right where we hit resistance before. This is our market memory. There are investors who bought here who regret doing so when the price went lower, and they want to get out, but they don't want to lose money, so they place their sell orders at the same level they bought at. Once again, we see market psychology. Resistance can remain intact for a while. All right. Here we have resistance, and support can too. Resistance becomes support, right? Seller's remorse. All right. Quint wants to come on, and I would prefer to have him out here before he gets too drunk. Although, as you can tell, I'm having a drink myself. But, whatever. He's a guy I'd like to kind of hang out with. All right, Quint. It's all yours, dude.
Ahoy! My name is Quint. I was a captain in Jaws. It's one of the most terrifying movies that was ever made. As you can probably tell by now, I like to drink this weird beer. Professor Mark can't figure out what brand it is, and I'm sure people out there can. Can you? If you can, please comment in this below. I was on the USS Indianapolis. Professor Mark Mothers still talks about what an asshole Professor Mark's dad was for taking Professor Mark to see Jaws when he was just 5 years old. After that, Professor Mark was afraid to go to the beach for about 2 years. Terrible, terrifying experience.
Yeah, I mean, my mother still talks about my parents got divorced when I was 2, so that was like, 40 or 51 years ago. But my mother still talks about how dumb my dad was for bringing us to see Jaws. Me and my brother were terrified. And it was a terrifying movie. Back then, you didn't need special effects. Like The Exorcist, Jaws. They were terrifying. Nowadays, they just rely on special effects and so forth. All right, well, anyway, this is our second biggest sector in the market. Notice how resistance became support, support became resistance. This is going to be kind of important to watch because when markets start to head lower, a lot of times money flows into the sectors that are considered safer, like consumer staples or healthcare. These are the sectors that, regardless of the economy, people are still going to need their products. So investors perceive, and notice how I say perceive, because it's not necessarily the case, but investors perceive that these sectors are safer. So if an institutional money manager needs to shift money out of a sector that's considered risky like tech, they go into a safer sector. So once again, we just saw tech is at an important level and healthcare is at an important level. That's 40% of the market. All right, now let's go take a look at the financial sector. All eyes are on financials because of the banking thing. And we could see here support becomes resistance. Remember, buyer's remorse. Resistance becomes support. Remember, seller's remorse. Support becomes resistance, buyer's remorse. Now, we're moving lower despite all the actions these banks are taking, the Fed is taking. Seems like we're still moving lower. We get down to around 29.70, maybe we get a tradable bounce. All right, Quint wants to come on and talk a little bit more.
There she is, my girl. She was a Portland-class heavy cruiser in the United States Navy, named after the city of Indianapolis in Indiana. In July of '45, Indianapolis completed a top-secret high-speed trip to deliver uranium and other components for the little boy, the first nuclear weapon ever used in combat, to the Tiananmen Naval Base, and subsequently deported for the Philippines on a training duty. Well, at 0:15 on the 30th of July, the ship was torpedoed by the Imperial Japanese Navy.
All right, thank you, Quint. The Indianapolis. What a that ship or that vessel fought in the when the Japanese invaded the Aleutian Islands. Has a storied history. Unfortunately, it's only remembered for something that was horrible. But here we see resistance become support. We move higher, or resistance becomes support. If we move higher, support might become resistance. If we move lower, look for support there. All right, let's go to our next sector. Industrials. Now, this is a clear example of how some price levels are more important than others. Look how clear the 97 support level has been. Look how clear the 103.50 resistance level has been. And this is really kind of amazing. I think people kind of take this for granted, but this kind of refutes a lot of academia. This shows that markets do not follow a random walk. If they did, there wouldn't be support or resistance levels. This shows that the primary reason for moves is investor psychology or sentiment. Like, why is this sector worth this much share? Then it loses about 3 or 4% to here, and then it comes right back up to where it was before. I mean, nothing really happened in the sector. I mean, did some factory blow up? Did they find gold in a safe somewhere? No. The only thing that really changes is investor perceptions. 98% of the time when markets are moving, it's because just of investor perceptions changing.
Oh, she was a beauty of a ship. She served President Roosevelt as ship of state and Admiral Spruce as the Fifth Fleet flagship in World War II. She fought gallantly through many campaigns and earned 10 battle stars. Her top secret final mission was to carry parts for the first atomic bomb used in combat to an airbase in Tiananmen. Just a few nights later, on July 30th, she fell prey to a Japanese submarine. In the 12 minutes of fire and chaos that came next, about 330 of her crew would be lost with the ship, and the rest, they plunged themselves into the sea. About 860 men would be left alone in the Pacific in the middle of the night. For the next 5 days, without food and water, the crew, they battled elements, dodged shark attacks, and clung to life as the best they could. Her sinking led to the greatest single loss of life at sea in the history of the United States Navy. Of 1,195 sailors and Marines on board, only 316 survived, and I was one.
Righty. And thank you, Quinn. Here again, support becomes resistance, resistance becomes support. Support, investors buy, they regret it when it goes lower, they try to get out at break even, they place their sell orders at the level that was support. Buyer's remorse can turn support into resistance. Investors sell, the market goes higher, a lot of these investors regret selling, they tell themselves they want to buy their shares back. If there's enough, the level that was resistance becomes support. Seller's remorse converts resistance into support. You can see this on a lot of charts. And once again, here we have a clear level up here of resistance. Now, according to academics, this shouldn't happen, but obviously we can see that it does. Here's our consumer staple sector. And we can see here resistance, resistance. Remember, buyer's remorse turns support into resistance. Support becomes resistance. Support becomes resistance. And we've got a little, a little bit of volatility, but this is only like within a point. Don't let the scale fool you, right? This is 70, this is 74. This is like a 1 point zone or a 2 point zone. So support, resistance, or sorry, support, resistance, support, resistance, support, resistance. Going to have to watch this week, right? We saw tech is at an important level. Healthcare is. We can get some clues out of here. So we'll just have to watch this. So make sure you check back. All right. All right. Quinn wants to come on again.
That Japanese sub, she slammed 2 torpedoes into her side, Chief. She was coming back from the island of Tiananmen on Leyte. We had just delivered the bomb. You know, the Hiroshima bomb. 1,100 men went into the water. Vessel went down in 12 minutes. Didn't see the first shark for about a half an hour. He was a tiger. I think about 13-footer. You know how you know when you're in the water, Chief? You tell by looking at the dorsal to the tail. We didn't know, because our bomb mission had been so secret. No distress signal had been sent.
Here's our energy sector. And once again, I hate to kick a dead horse to death here, but if you want to learn how to trade, you got to understand this whole concept. Resistance becomes support. Support becomes resistance. Resistance becomes support. Heading lower, oil is really kind of breaking down. I think it's because of an economic slowdown, but I'm just glad that my oil bill is not going to be so expensive anymore. You probably are too. Good chance this continues to head lower. Could find some support around 69. The utility sector, and once again, resistance becomes support, support becomes resistance. If you don't look at charts through the context of what does it tell us about supply and demand, you're never going to be able to figure them out. There's no, it's not like about there's like a pattern. I've seen over the years a lot of people debate, oh, there's this pattern, is this that pattern. To me, it's kind of ridiculous. You know why? Because no one's going to pay you for saying this is a pattern. You're going to get paid by the market if you start to learn how this shows investor psychology. Support or resistance becomes support, seller's remorse. Support becomes resistance, buyer's remorse, right? We're looking at an illustration of human psychology. Why did this sector lose so much value in a matter of 2 weeks or 3 weeks? Lost over 10%. Investor perceptions, investor psychology. All right, let me bring Clint back on here.
You know, by the end of that first dawn, we'd lost 100 men. I don't know how many sharks, maybe 1,000. Don't know how many men. They averaged 6 an hour. On Thursday morning, Chief, I bumped into a friend of mine, Herbie Robinson, from Cleveland. He's a baseball player. He's a boatsman's mate too. So I thought he was asleep. I reached over to wake him and bobbed up and down in the water, just like a kind of top, upended. Well, he had been bitten in half from the waist down. Knowing the fifth day, Mr. Hooper, the Lockheed Ventura saw us. He swung in low and he saw us. Young pilot, a lot younger than Mr. Hooper. Anyway, he saw us and he came in low. 3 hours later, big fat PBY came down and started to pick us up. You know, that was about the time I was most frightened waiting my turn. So 1,100 men went into the water and 316 men came out. The Sharks took the rest June 29th, 1945. So no, Mr. Hooper, I'll never put a life jacket on again.
Here's our material sector: resistance, 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 support. Now, this is broken support. I mean, there's a chance it comes right back, but we need to be flexible and let the market tell us what to do. When support breaks, meaning the price trades below it, it tells us that. Remember, look at a chart in the context of what does it tell you about supply and demand. If a support level breaks, it's an illustration that the investors who created the support with their buy orders have left the market. When you take demand out of a market, it sets the stage for it to go lower, regardless of the market. Stock market, crypto market, real estate. If you're buying apples, doesn't matter. Shoes, same thing. All right, here's our smallest sector, real estate. And we can see once again, resistance becomes support. Support becomes resistance, 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 resistance becomes support. You have to know where these levels are if you want to be successful. All right, so I'm going to bring out some of the sellers from the Indianapolis. And this is kind of somber. Usually I like to end with a joke or whatever, but I don't think this is a good time for it. And I think that you should, the next time you're feeling bad about how your life is going, just count your blessings, because you could have been one of the young people that was on the Indianapolis. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. I will talk to you next week.
If you don't remember, you don't forget, and that's just not right. Professor Markey had a hard time writing this newsletter this week because the story was so tragic. He is definitely one of the most solid patriots I've ever met in this country. As I've known a lot of people, but Professor Markey believes in America. Boy bleeds red, white, and blue. But he decided to read our little known story, needed to be told. So if you don't mind, we didn't have the internet back in the day, but if you do, please check out these websites, the ussindianapolis.com/the story or navymemorial.org. Thank you again, and God bless America. And here's a prayer that I like to say before I go to sea. O eternal Lord, O God, who alone spreadest out the heavens and rulest the rage of the sea, vouchsafe to thy and to thy almighty and most gracious protection our country's navy and all those who serve therein. Preserve them from the dangers of the sea and from the violence of the enemy, that they may be safeguard unto the United States of America and as a security for such as pass unto the seas upon their lawful occasions, that the inhabitants of our lands may in peace and quietness serve thee, O God, in the glory in thy name. Amen.